This is a video that wasn't supposed to happen, because it's something that I wasn't planning or making in this way, but the opportunity presented itself, so I decided to take it. A few days ago on Twitter, I made a tweet asking what everyone's most wanted piece of lost media was, out of curiosity and to see if there happened to be any overlap with what was suggested. To my surprise, the tweet got a lot of attention, with nearly 300 comments, and as I started reading through them, I was really impressed with the pieces of lost media that you guys wanted found, and thought it would be interesting to share this dataset in a video, discussing what the most wanted pieces of lost media were according to you guys on Twitter. Now, there were so many great suggestions in general, and I honestly found so many of them to be interesting enough for other videos. So I do plan on returning to this dataset and making more content based off of it. But for today, we'll start with the least popular and make our way to the most popular. I'm sure you're familiar with all the discussion and speculation that surrounds the Nintendo 64, and the games that were either cancelled entirely or reworked into the iterations we have today. You got your Zeldas and your Marios, which is expected, and usually get brought up in relation to this kind of thing. But a reworked N64 game that I don't really see get brought up too often anymore is 12 Tales Conker 64. It was really a surprise seeing so many people mention it in the Twitter thread, since I haven't even thought about the game in years, and there doesn't seem to be as much interest in it compared to the other Nintendo 64 beta content that people try and find. If you haven't heard about 12 Tales before, there's a really interesting backstory about it, having first been announced at E3 1997. Some of the oldest content that has resurfaced from the game dates back to this event, when Rare showcased a video reel of different areas of the game, along with Conker running around and interacting in them. From the looks of it, this is exactly the kind of kid-friendly platformer game you'd expect from Rare, and for that reason, the developers received criticism for making a game so similar to Banjo-Kazooie, starring cute animal characters. As a response to what was being said about the game, Rare removed the title from upcoming game lists at the time, and for a while, it was speculated to have been completely cancelled. However, the game eventually resurfaced in early 2000 as Conker's Bad Fur Day, and at the time, many people believed this was an April Fool's Day joke, but it wasn't. Rare had reworked the game from the ground up to appeal to a more adult audience, and distance itself from the animal platformer it had been before. Though in doing this, it created an entire rabbit hole of Lost Conker content from the earliest iteration of the game, and for years, it's been a source of speculation for Nintendo 64 and Conker fans. The original game was essentially buried after being reworked, and there wasn't any kind of urgency or reason to preserve it back then, and as a result, the ROM for the game has never resurfaced. So while the game cannot currently be played, we do have a lot of content available online to at least give us an idea of how the game worked. The best looking collection of images come from Rare's website itself, which show Conker and Berry running through many themed environments, as well as a multiplayer mode. I always felt like these images did the game justice, with how colorful and creative each world appeared. There's also a collection of images from an E3 1997 press kit, showing off most of the same features as the images from Rare's website, as well as a file select screen. Thankfully, these photos are not the only content we still have from the game, as over the years, several more gameplay trailers and demonstrations have resurfaced. While I'm not really a Conker fan, I do think it would have been a nice addition to the N64, even in this form. And nowadays, it's not often you see people complaining about the direction of this earlier vision for the game. It's quite the opposite. Though there are elements in Bad Fur Day that originate from 12 Tales, the games are completely different, and it's unclear whether or not we'll ever find this one. I remember reading somewhere years ago that a former Rare employee confirmed the original computers that were used to develop the game were wiped and are long gone, which isn't going to help the search. There's still a lot of interest in getting Nintendo 64 betas found, and progress has been made over the past decade, so we might end up being able to play 12 Tales again. The next topic that people have a lot of interest in is one that I've actually gotten several requests to cover before, so I'm not too surprised to see it brought up here again, and after looking into the mystery, it's something I wish I had covered sooner. When you're not a fan of a certain series or haven't played the specific game that a piece of lost media is from, it can be a little hard to get into the topic, which is what happened with the Paper Mario Sticker Star E3 2010 trailer. When people used to ask me about this topic, the message wouldn't get into details about the trailer, just that it's lost and usually this Wiggler picture would be the one that was attached. Since I'm not a big Paper Mario fan, and this image is a direct capture, I always thought to myself, the trailer must be partially found and we're only missing a small part of it. However, that's not the case at all, and the search is way more interesting than that. Firstly, it should be stated that, similar to most game betas, the original build contains many differences from the final, and in the case of Paper Mario Sticker Star, the entire game ended up being different, so for that reason, this trailer is worth finding. But there's an extra part to this search that is really cool. The original trailer to this game wasn't shown online or was available for download somewhere, but instead, it remained an exclusive to 3DS demo units at E3 2010, so you had to be at the event and physically holding one of these consoles while the trailer was playing to watch it. This has been an important piece of Paper Mario Lost Media ever since it was discovered to have not been re-uploaded online, and many fans of the series have been searching for leads on where a copy of the trailer might be. Chugga Conroy even made a tweet about it to bring attention to the search. Currently, the only footage we have from this trailer is a 14-second cam rip from Nintendo World Report, but its total length is believed to be a minute or two, so there's a lot of content still missing. Though we do have the beta song that was used in the trailer, as well as some screenshots from gaming websites, which is where that direct capture of the Wiggler I keep seeing came from. Despite Nintendo having re-uploaded other Paper Mario Sticker Star videos after E3 2010, the trailer from that event was never re-uploaded, and it doesn't seem to be available online either, at least currently. I tried doing some research on exactly where the search for this trailer stands, but I couldn't really find anything about what has or hasn't been found yet. There is a thread from the Lost Media Wiki forums that discusses the search briefly, and a user named Reese mentions that they've only found the same screenshots and 14-second clip we already have. It's also mentioned that Nintendo World Report's other Paper Mario coverage from E3 2010 has since been taken down or deleted, so it's possible they had access to more footage from the trailer, even if it's more camera quality. I was thinking about this as well. It's possible that a gaming website got a direct trailer that no one knew about or saved while it was up, and it could be like the Luigi's Mansion Space World trailer, where we have to find a gaming journalist that would still have it. Earlier in the video, I mentioned the interest people have in archiving Nintendo 64 games that were either cancelled or heavily reworked, and this game fits those perfectly. Though, unlike Conker, I'm not surprised to see people still talking about Earthbound 64. It's one of the most classic examples of Nintendo 64 lost media, specifically from the Nintendo 64 DD, which is a whole rabbit hole of lost games in itself. Earthbound 64 began development in the mid-1990s on a standard Nintendo 64 cartridge, and was anticipated to be released as a launch title for the console in Japan. But their large-scale development of the game would result in a change from cartridge to a 64DD disc. It was reported that about half the game was developed before this switch, but Miyamoto reported at E3 1997 that the game was now expected to be a launch title for the 64DD peripheral in Japan, with the expectation being that a localized version would eventually come to the States. And there was a lot of reason to believe that, as a playable version of the game would appear 2 years later at Space World 1999, with its development being half complete according to IGN. However, it was a combination of the 64DD's failure in Japan and the team running into development issues with the game that resulted in a continuous delay and no word on its status at E3 2000, followed shortly after by confirmation of its cancellation before Space World 2000. Even though Earthbound 64 was cancelled, the game was revived in Japan as Mother 3 and released for the Game Boy Advance years later. But for decades after the original game was cancelled, fans have been dedicated to preserving any content they can from the project. I remember Earthbound 64 being one of the first cancelled games I ever came across back in the early 2010s, and it was the Space World 1999 footage that became some of the most iconic and only content from the game that was passed around. As more fans and video game preservationists became aware of this game, more content has been recovered over the years, including more short trailers from Space World 1996 and 1997, as well as screenshots, concept art, and magazine scans. I hadn't really looked at this topic in quite a while, and even I was surprised with how much has been found since I last researched it. There's almost something sad about seeing all this new material resurface, unlike Ocarina of Time or Mario 64. Earthbound 64 hits differently, and maybe that's because we can't play anything close to what this original vision of the game was supposed to be, and that's too bad. The holy grail would be to find a ROM of the game, and since we know there were playable demos at Space World, they could still be out there, and people do search for this kind of thing. It's related to a whole side search for 64DD blue discs, which were used in the development of these games. It's been stated that 60% of the game was complete and 30% finalized, but an additional 2 years would have been needed to finish it. Either that, or the scope of the game would have been reduced years prior to possibly get it out for a 2000 release. But there were so many other factors that contributed to its cancellation, like Miyamoto being occupied by other projects, and Iwata being off-site for travel. I've also read some statements that claim the game was considered being brought to the GameCube, but I couldn't find any evidence of that, only that Miyamoto was interested in reviving the project after its cancellation, which did end up happening on the Game Boy Advance. It would have been great to have a GameCube version, since it probably would have been really close to the Nintendo 64 version, but it's cool to know that there's still a search for it. Before we get to the most wanted piece of lost media, let's do a little honorable mentions section, because there were a couple picks that came in right under the rest that I think are worth mentioning. I've discussed both of them recently though, so I'll group them together here. First is JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Phantom Blood, which has always been a pretty popular request, though has become less of an interest in the past couple years. I think this is because the search has largely been at a standstill for quite a while, at least in the public eye, and the only leads that have been made recently were finding new scans and concept art, as well as some behind-the-scenes work like interviews with staff, but it hasn't led anywhere. The two biggest pieces of content we have from the movie are 16 minutes of footage that were uploaded to YouTube a long time ago from a student who was given the piece as part of a sound design project, and the other is the pilot trailer for the film that was found on a Screener DVD. The actual movie, however, was never even released on home media, as the company that produced it lost the rights. So we'd need to get an official release, which seems unlikely, or find an unofficial copy, which is more likely but equally as difficult. since that's a community we don't have much access to. While there are people exploring options relating to that, there's nothing new to report on it yet. The second honorable mention is Saki Sonobashi, which has got me a little mixed. I think it's a matter of wanting it to be real for the fact that everything about it doesn't seem real, and the story is more what people are after and not so much the piece itself. If you're not familiar with its history, it's a search for a lost horror anime about girls trapped in a bathroom that was apparently on a website for adult anime back in the early 2000s, that someone on 4chan claimed to watch and never found again. The original post is from 2015, but it really gained attention a few years later and has been a topic of debate ever since, with some people believing the details are specific enough to be real, but since no evidence proving its existence has been found, it could also be a hoax. We don't even know who OP was in the original thread, so there's no way to get more first-hand information that we know is accurate, because people have even tried faking being OP before. The topic has become more of an urban legend than anything else, and nothing has happened with it in a long time. Even the thread on the Lost Media Wiki forums that I had been following debunked a whole lot of information that was previously believed to be legit. While the majority of people seem to believe Saki Sonobashi doesn't actually exist, it's more commonly believed that if it does exist, we've already found it and don't even realize it. People have found a lot of horror anime from the same era it was supposedly from, so it's not unlikely that OP was misremembering some details. We'll never know for sure though, because there's nothing we can prove until more evidence is found. It definitely seems like there's a theme here with what category the most wanted pieces of lost media are from, and that's video games. I guess the whole video has pretty much been about video games, which isn't too surprising in itself, since there were plenty of websites and YouTubers making videos about lost games long before the Lost Media Wiki was around. But the one piece of lost media that I saw the most people comment about in the Twitter thread was certainly unexpected, because even though it's a classic topic and one that I'm familiar with, I didn't know so many people shared the same passion about it. This is none other than the beta of Sonic 1, otherwise known as the Tokyo Toy Show prototype, and it's something that I rarely see get mentioned or brought up nowadays. I don't even think it was particularly popular back when I made my original video about it, but I just never see it discussed, and maybe that's because the mystery about it runs so deep that there's not a whole lot we can do to find it. If you're not familiar with this topic, let me introduce you. At the Tokyo Toy Show in June 1990, Sonic the Hedgehog was shown off to the public for the first time, in a playable demo that hasn't been seen since the event. The demo was small, but more advanced than the final version of the game, which included several layers of parallax scrolling taking place in an early version of Green Hill Zone. There are a lot of differences to the level layout and sprites, most notably an unused enemy character only seen in these screenshots, a big sign, and Sonic himself with different sprites as well. These screenshots are the only pieces of content to resurface from this prototype, most of which come from the August 1990 issue of Mega Drive Fan magazine. The demo that was at the Tokyo Toy Show has never been found, leaving the game completely unplayable, although it wasn't supposed to be like that. Yuji Naka confirmed in an interview with Games Radar that this demo was supposed to be included in Sonic Mega Collection for the GameCube, but never was because Sega lost the ROM. Interestingly, while doing some more research for this video, I found some new information from the cutting room floor that adds more content to the search, including a couple really cool photos that were recently discovered of the game running at Sega's booth. There's also interesting information in the entry on the cutting room floor about the demo that I've never come across, such as a claim that Electronic Gaming Monthly said the game wasn't playable but only a self-running demo, and Sega themselves stating in a retrospective that the game was only shown behind closed doors at the Tokyo Toy Show. Yuji Naka contradicts both of these claims, and I would believe his word over anyone else's, especially since the new screenshots showed the game on the show floor, and it must have been playable if it was supposed to be put in Sonic Mega Collection. It's still interesting that these claims exist at all, and adds to the overall rarity of the demo itself. It's too bad that no one knows where it is, because not only would the demo not be lost in general, but we'd also all be able to play it if it was released on Sonic Mega Collection like it was supposed to. And even if Sega did find it nowadays, I'm not sure if they'd be so quick to release it anymore, now that it's become more desired. While Sega is definitely more interested in listening to its fans than Nintendo is, it's still something that they might not want to release anymore. I was kind of thinking about this recently with the Johnny Bravo pilot Meso Blues, where Van Partible confirmed he was the only person who had a copy and had no plans to release it because he likes the idea of keeping it elusive. And I can't help but wonder how different this situation would have been if a fan knew about the pilot a decade ago and asked him to release it back then. The value of Meso Blues has only increased because of the culture surrounding preservation and interest in childhood cartoons, but it wasn't like that before, and that could be the same case for the Sonic demo too. When Mega Collection came out, Sonic was only a little over 10 years old, but now he's 30, and that legacy has certainly grown since then, to the point where the first demo of his existence is more wanted and is the most wanted piece of lost media from Twitter. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Be sure to check out some of my other lost media videos. Thanks for watching, and until next time, Finn.